Well, it's so nice to see everybody. We are going to get started as people continue to join because we have so much to cover with Daryn. Really excited to see all of you and have you here for today's webinar. My name is Judy Browse, and I'm the Executive Director of NAAEE, the North American Association for Environmental Education. And it is so great to see you here to think about how we can work better in communities. We all work in communities. How can we do this work better? And we couldn't have a better presenter today than Daryn. And we know that all of you, and I'll introduce Daryn in just a minute, but we know that so many of you are struggling right now with all the federal cuts and all the things that are happening. And we really hope that this webinar will give you some positive tips and tricks and ways to think about how to build bridges in your community, how to work better, how to collaborate better. What are some positive things that we all can do? And Daryn, thank you so much for being here with us. So just to make sure this webinar is working with communities to make a difference, hope you're all at the right place. And we will just have a few intro comments here before I turn it over to Daryn. So this is part of NAA's webinar series where we're trying to bring new ideas, speakers, different insights to our field and to intersecting fields to help advance our collective work together. Want to thank all our affiliate co-hosts. We have a wonderful affiliate network across North America with 52 state, regional, and provincial affiliates. I encourage you to get engaged with your local and state affiliates and really be able to engage at whatever level you would like. And we do want to hear from you throughout the webinar, even though this is a webinar format and everybody is muted, you can communicate with us in the chat. So please put your questions and comments in the chat throughout as we go. And we'll also leave time at the end to get to as many as we can. And really appreciate those of you who send in questions in advance. We have shared those with Daryn, and we look forward to answering as many questions as we can together. I also encourage you, if it will help, to click on the closed captioning button. I'll show you where that is in a minute. 31 language possibilities to help if English is not your first language, and we will record the webinar and share that as well. So don't worry about taking notes. And you can see that the chat and the closed captioning is right in your toolbar, either at the bottom or the top, depending on your computer. And I just want to give a big thank you to Carrie. Carrie is an amazing part of the NAA team. She's our senior communications and data specialist. She has done so much to help with all our communications, our social media, our podcasts. She manages the webinar series. And Carrie, thank you for all you do. And thanks for being here to help support us. And so now the best part of the webinar is introducing our speaker, Daryn Cambridge. And some of you might know Daryn because he has been a true friend of NAAEE. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Daryn, and I'll put a slide up here that has a few bullets as I'm talking. But I'm really excited to have him here. He is a creative facilitator and producer. He's worked on so many different he's worked in many different intersecting fields, including peace building, international education, nonviolent action, civics education and engagement, leadership development, and community organizing. He currently works as an organizational development and training consultant at the Training Resources Group, or TRG, and he supports clients across the country and around the world. He's really been a wonderful friend for us. As I mentioned, he's conducted training on conflict resolution for our team and been part of our annual conference, including conducting one of the best openings to engage all attendees at the conference. He's worked at the U.S. Institute of Peace, the International Center on Nonviolent Conflict. He's been a professor at American University and a peace educator there. He's also worked for Common Cause and the Democracy Matters Institute and the Close-Up Foundation. And he was also an urban crew leader with the Student Conservation Association, working with students from the DC area, helping to build trails and do conservation work. In addition to his experience in education, training, and workshop facilitation, he's also skilled in web design, social media integration, grassroots organizing, and audio and video creation and editing. I have to say that, Daryn, you are one of the most thoughtful, talented, and creative people I've had the pleasure of working with, and we are so, so excited that you are here with us today. So I am going to turn it over to you, and thank you again for being with us.
Judy, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you, and Carrie, thank you to you as well. And I love seeing everybody's introductions coming in through the chat. I see some familiar names in there as well, which is great. So I'm gonna jump right into it, so we can get to some good discussion and conversations, idea generation, and hopefully something that you all are gonna walk away with that's going to make you that much more equipped and that much stronger in your community engagement work. And as Judy said, she did share some questions ahead of time that folks shared when you registered. And I think that what we're going to talk about today, we'll touch on many of those around building trust with certain community members. What do you do when you have folks who say they're committed, but then don't really follow through? Again, I remember those being some of the questions. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up my screen and okay. And just give me a reaction to let me know that you can see my screen, like a thumbs up or whatever.
Looks good,
Okay.
Daryn.
Okay, great. All right. So our objectives over the next 50 minutes or so are basic but broad. So we want you all to be able to build analytical skills and how to engage people to gain their support in making a difference that you're trying to bring about and achieving results. So how do you work with diverse groups of people in a community when you're trying to make a difference? And I want you all to start thinking about the community engagement work that you're currently involved in. Large scale, small scale, doesn't matter what it is. A project that you're working on that requires you and encourages you to work with a community, because you're going to hopefully walk away with being able to develop an approach for how you can, again, strengthen your effectiveness in bringing about that difference with this community. So just start thinking about a community project that you're working on and kind of keep that top of mind as we go through the webinar. We're going to start with a short icebreaker. So I'm going to invite you all to share some more things in the chat so I can get to know a bit more about you. We'll go over an overview and some considerations of the model that I'm going to introduce and some of the characteristics and strategies. And I'm going to actually invite many of you to come into the conversation to share some of your current, present, lived experience around working with, again, different folks in community engagement work. And then at the end, we'll have some time for you to share, for everybody to share some takeaways in the chat, and then hopefully address any questions that folks have. But if at any point throughout this presentation you have questions or comments, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. We have, I think, 78 attendees right now. That is a wealth of knowledge and experience, so we want to make sure we tap into that as we go through the webinar. So our icebreaker, and again, I'm going to invite all of you to post your response in the chat, is what is one word that your friends would use to describe you? So go ahead and put that into the chat. And whatever you share in the chat, know that I may call on you and invite you to come off of mute and perhaps turn on your camera and share how that characteristic can or does help you work effectively with communities. So again, I invite you all to go ahead, and I see some starting to come in now. You've posted yours in the chat. Make sure you scroll through and see what others on the webinar have shared. Okay, I think some are still coming in. And I see someone wrote mom-ish, and I see someone also said that they love mom-ish. I am going to invite Anne, who wrote and typed in momish. If you are comfortable doing so, would love for you, we can take you off of mute. And would you be willing to come off of mute and share with us vocally how, how this characteristic has helped you work effectively with communities? Please go ahead. And if you could turn your camera on too, not required, but if possible, we'd love to see you as well, if that's possible. Go ahead, Anne.
Okay. I think it's helped me because I think innately the sense of caring and wanting the best outcomes for everyone, for all, like all engaged parties. I think that kind of maybe maybe it brings like some authenticity and some buy-in right away.
So that affect is people feel like there's authenticity there and people feel like you're the real deal. They're willing to work with you. They kind of know kind of where you stand. And then he also said bringing in that like element of like caring, that people feel that at the start. Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks, Anne. And then Mamadou, I see you wrote The Lion. And so Mamadou, I'd like to invite you to come off of mute if you're comfortable doing so. And again, turn on your camera if you're comfortable doing so, and share with us how this characteristic can or does help you work effectively with communities. Okay, we're not able to bring you in yet, Mamadou, and that's fine. If you can type into the chat, tell us a little bit about how being seen as the lion has made you effective. Please go ahead and type that in the chat. Would love to hear. And I'm going to call on one other person. I again invite you to come off of mute. I see Roberta Hunter wrote Nature Smart. I'd love to have you come
I'm
off.
sorry.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Mama, there
I'm
you go.
Mamadou. Yeah, I'm
Please, go
here
ahead.
because, yes, I'm sorry for taking time before you answering. In my community, they love very much what I'm doing, and they qualify me as a lion because of the strength that I embody, I symbolize for them, because they said I'm strong like a lion. That's it.
Love it, Mamadou. Yeah, I'm sure it takes a lot of experience with the community to earn that title and that description. And thank you. I'm glad that you were able to come off of mute. And then I'll go to Roberta. Roberta, if you are able to do so, could you come off of mute and share with us Nature Smart and how this characteristic has helped you be effective with communities?
There we go. Can you hear me? It's Roberta.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so I said nature smart because I'm the one that all my friends and family call me when they're like, what is this bug? What is this bird? Why is this stream doing this? And I think what they love is that I'm passionate about connecting people and the world around them, whether it's nature or, you know, human made. And they see that passion and willingness to share knowledge. So.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Roberta. Thank you. Yeah, seeing, how to connect people again through your passion for all things nature. And then people turn to you as the first name that they think of when they have a question. So great. Thank you, Roberta. Okay. All right. So I'll move us along. And again, thanks to everybody who shared their descriptor in the chat. So let's go into the meat of this webinar. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a pretty quick and brief overview of this model, of this framework. It's the strategic influencing model. It's been around for many, many years, tried and tested in various ways. There are a lot of different models for community engagement, but we landed on this one because it's pretty broadly applicable. But the way it's defined is strategic influencing is the ability to persuade other people to implement your ideas, suggestions, or take desired actions. So that's what we're talking about today. So the question is, how can you do this more effectively? And so I want to poll you all, and again, ask you all to go to the chat. We've got the definition up here on the slide. And so on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being low, 5 being high, how would you rate yourself at being influential as it is described on this slide here? And just a quick, very informal poll, type 1 through 5 in the chat. Okay, we're getting a good broad range here. I would say we are probably maybe averaging out around 3.5. Okay, great. So for those of you who feel like, hey, I feel like I'm quite influential, I ask that you be what's the word? You be generous with your contributions as we get to a part of this webinar where I'm going to invite people to kind of share their own perspective and their own experience. All right, and so what makes you successful at being influential, and what makes you struggle at being influential? So I'm going to call on a couple people, maybe one on either side here. So I've got Naomi Thompson. You gave yourself a 5. So I'm going to invite you, if you're able to do so, come off of mute and share with us what makes you successful at being influential.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty organized and very passionate about things when I'm trying to be influential. And I think I really want to make sure I find what people are good at so I can fit them into the right job and they can be successful at it and really start to want to do what it is I'm trying to do.
So identifying what people are good at, maybe also what they're passionate about, and figuring out how can you leverage that or utilize that to move them in a direction.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, thanks, Naomi. And I'd love for scanning for folks who put like a 1 or a 2. Oops. And Sheila Wright, you gave yourself a 1. And so I'd love for you to come off mute and share with us where do you struggle in being influential?
I don't know if I'm unmuted or not.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. Well, I've been adjunct faculty for almost 20 years and no intention to become full-time. And I feel when I'm on committees and I try to communicate with people, I don't get responses. I feel like I have a lack of credibility because of my adjunct standing. So I don't feel I'm very influential at all.
So I'm hearing a little bit like your positionality in certain things you feel like makes it difficult for you to be as influential as you would like.
Right.
Right. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Well, great. Thanks for those of you who are able to share perspectives. All right. So let's jump into the grid here. So a couple considerations around which the strategic influencing model is based. First is looking at the level of agreement that you have with another person or a group of people. And that is based off of agreement around the goals that you are seeking. So do you have agreement around what is to be accomplished or what you want to achieve? Do you have, or what's your level of agreement around direction? So what needs to be done to get there, to get to that goal? And what level of agreement do you have on the big issues? So what's important, in other words, the values that underlie the goals or the actions. So looking again at the community engagement project that hopefully you're still thinking about, and you're thinking about all the people that are involved in this or are impacted by it, what is your level of agreement with these various individuals around goals, directions, and big issues? Then the strategic influencing model also looks at level of trust. So that's around credibility, right? Can you trust what they say? Do you believe what they say? Are they being authentic and saying what they actually think? What's your level of trust around how predictable they are? Will they behave the same way? Do they have a track record of responding in a consistent way? Have they just demonstrated a pattern of behavior that gives you a way to anticipate their actions? And then what's your level of trust around reliability? And by reliability, we mean, can they be counted on to do what they say? Are they going to do what they say? Are they in a position to follow through on their commitment or their promise? So those are the 2 things that I want you to be thinking about as you, again, consider all the individuals in your community engagement work. So I want, again, to have you all take a moment here and just pause and prep for the rest of this. Is think about the positive change, the difference that you're trying to create in and with a community. identify the different kinds of people or the different groups who are playing a role or who can potentially play a role in making this change happen. And if you have a notebook or a pen or paper or something, maybe writing it down will help you as well, because you never know, I may call on you to share your perspective. So if it helps, maybe jot it down on a piece of paper or type it up on your computer. As I present the framework and how to kind of make meaning of all this and put it to use, think about where you would place these individuals and these groups on this grid. So we'll start building it together. And if you want to, again, recreate the grid on a piece of paper, it's a simple XY axis. You can actually start writing down the names of these people and these groups on the grid. And then again, I'll call on some folks. And if you are able to come off of mute, I'll ask you to discuss what, where you put people on this grid, why you put them on the grid, and how you can approach them more strategically. So I'll walk through the different elements here. So Y-axis, we have level of agreement, low to high. X-axis, we have what is your level of trust, low to high. So the first group we're going to look at are allies. So who do you consider to be an ally? These are individuals where you have a high level of agreement and you have a high level of trust. So these are satisfied clients, colleagues, staff, members of the community, and so forth. They're supportive of your vision. They want what you want. They want to make the same changes, positive changes that you want to make. You can talk to them, and you have perhaps talked to them honestly about your vision, about your goals. You can get advice from them to help guide your decisions moving forward, because again, they're on your team. They want you to succeed. And perhaps these are individuals that can do for you what you can't do for yourself. So if there's a member of the community that you don't have a good relationship with, or you have no relationship with, maybe an ally does. And maybe an ally can actually go and talk to that individual or that group, right? So those are allies. So if you are jotting down and creating your own grid here, start writing down who are, names of people or groups that you would consider to be allies in your community engagement work. Then we have opponents. So this would be a category of folks who are, you have a high level of trust, but a low level of agreement. And I want to emphasize, sometimes we put a negative kind of framing around the word opponent. But when we're looking at the strategic influencing model, opponent is not a negative thing, because you have a high level of trust with this person or these people. So these are individuals that actually bring out the best in us. These are individuals who help provide some honesty, some other perspectives to problem solving. They're outside of your, for lack of a better phrase, echo chamber. They're not telling you things that you already think and you already believe. They're providing you with a different perspective. And you value that perspective because you have a trusting relationship with them. And they know, because they have a different perspective, they know what you need to do to build support from others who are not currently on board with what you want. So an opponent is somebody that can help you give, shed some light on those perspectives that you may not totally be aware of. And so you can dialogue with an opponent because you trust them, even though they don't agree on your vision or your goals. They might see it differently, but you have a respectful, trusting relationship with them. So think about those individuals and groups, maybe write them down on a piece of paper. Who would be some opponents in your community engagement work? All right, now we've got pleasers. This would be a group of people or individuals who they demonstrate a high level of agreement. They agree with what you're saying. They say it's a good idea, but there's a low level of trust. And so these are folks that perhaps they have a hidden agenda. They will agree with you, but they may not be able to commit to actually doing anything in support of that agreement for political reasons or other things. You're never really sure if they're going to follow through. Like, well, you said you agreed with me a month ago when we had this meeting and that you were going to do these 3 things and you didn't do any of them. So here we are now, our next meeting, you're saying, yeah, I love that. It's a great idea. We should do that. But you're like, you just don't really trust that they're actually going to follow through on, some of those commitments. And so again, these are folks that they tend to say yes, they tend to agree, yet they don't follow through. So these would be folks that, again, we refer to as like pleasers, again, folks who are demonstrating these behaviors. So again, think about folks in your situation that you would maybe put in this category. Then we have adversaries. All right, these are individuals or these are groups who they're not to be confused with opponents. The main difference here is it's a low level of agreement and a low level of trust. So when you've tried to speak with someone who thinks differently than you do, wants something different than you do, but the negotiations have failed, your attempts to influence them have failed, and you realize, no, they're dug in. There's like not really any space for conversation or dialogue anymore. They're taking a different position and they're adversarial here. So really no agreement there and no level, a low level of trust. So again, think about who are some of the adversaries that you might be encountering or dealing with in your community engagement work. And then last, the fifth category are fence sitters. So these would be individuals or groups who are demonstrating the following kind of behaviors. You're not really sure where this individual or these people stand on an issue. They're constantly going back and forth. They're not stating, this is what I think, this is what I believe, this is what I think we should do. They're always kind of in the middle. They're always kind of riddled with doubt. And so you're not really sure what their agenda is. You don't really know what they want. And so they're not really committing to anything. It's hard for you to kind of, place them. Now, what I will say on this model that I think I want us to be conscious of, with any model, it's not perfect, but it's a way to get us started. It's a way to have us start thinking strategically. But I don't want us to label people of like, you're a pleaser, you're an ally, you're an opponent or whatever, because that can get somewhat problematic sometimes. This is all situationally driven, right? And it's really about in a particular situation, around a particular change that you're trying to make in a given context, people might be displaying certain behaviors that we would consider, ally behaviors or opponent behaviors or pleaser behaviors. But I just want us to be conscious of, we always want to steer clear of just labeling people and saying, oh, you're this or you're that, as if that's some way to kind of put a jersey on someone or define them. So that's another way I just kind of want to, make sense of this. All right, so now that we've got this model and we're able to kind of think about a particular situation that you're in, change that you're trying to create in a community, all the different folks who are involved in it, are players in it or impacted by it, and you get a sense of, in this situation, I feel like they're demonstrating, opponent behaviors or ally, pleaser, fence sitter, adversary behaviors. What do you do, right? So if you've got individuals that in your context, you feel at this moment are allies, here are some things that you can do. You can use them as a sounding board. You can ask them for their advice. So ask yourself, are you doing that? Are you going to your allies and asking them for advice? Are you seeking their support for dealing with adversaries? Like I said earlier, these may be individuals that have a trusting relationship with an adversary or somebody else in the community that you don't yet have. So can an ally actually go and generate some support from others in the community in a way that you might not be able to? Are you acknowledging and really appreciating and showing gratitude for that good relationship, that trusting relationship that you have, because you want to keep allies in this situation? So are you doing what you need to do to ensure that you're doing that? And are you being open to share your plans, your doubts, your fears and needs? Are you really seeing that trusting relationship in a valuable way, which part of that is you can be vulnerable. You can express some of those doubts and fears with an ally because they want what you want and they're going to help you navigate that. So with this in mind and thinking about allies in your situation and all the things that you could be doing to strategically engage with allies, I'd love for you to click the raise hand button, which is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. There should be one of the buttons should say reaction. And one of those options is to raise your hand. And I want you to raise your hand if you had thought of a person and maybe wrote it down or you have it in your head that you're working with in your community engagement work that you would consider to be an ally? All right, I see a few hands starting to pop up. Okay, so I see several hands here, and I'm going to call on one of you to share with us your experience, right? Why do you consider this person or this group to be an ally? What behaviors have they been demonstrating that makes you feel like, in this situation, they're an ally? What are you already doing on this list that I just showed with this person or with this group? And what do you think you could be doing more of on this list that maybe you're not doing much of or you're not doing it all right now? So I'm going to bring that list back up and I'm going to call on, let's see here. Some hands went down. Call some people here. Let's see. All right, I'm going to call on Mallory. Mallory, if you would be so kind, if you're able to come off of mute and tell us a little bit around why, tell us about your community engagement, work, who this group is, why they're an ally, and what you could be doing more of.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep, go ahead.
All right. So I work with a local organization, environmental ed organization, and I would identify an ally as another local EE organization in town, and we do kind of interact with each other as far as programming, but we also have different focuses, I guess. So for example, my organization focuses specifically on watersheds and that education, and the other organization is more natural history. So when it comes to something that we can both benefit from, maybe I might lead, a program for one of their camps or something for a couple days, and we can also benefit from them of some of the gear that they have or some other programs that we would be able to benefit from them sharing with us. So yeah, I would consider them an ally for sure.
Great. And so from this list that we have on the screen here, how can you engage with them differently at all moving forward? Again, using this kind of tool around, all right, they're an ally, are you using them as effectively as you could as a sounding board? Would you turn to them to support for their support in dealing with an adversary? How do you acknowledge the relationship and the positive relationship that you have? Are you able to be vulnerable with them? What are some of the things on this list that you're already doing? And maybe what are some things on this list that you could be doing more of?
Yeah, I think one of the main things is I do have pretty good standing relationships with the individual people who I've worked with them on other projects prior to working with my current organization. So I think that having that relationship beforehand is really helpful in going into being able to help each other more. Because of that, I'm a little newer to working in the environmental ed world. Having the openness to share, what are some of the things that they struggle with that, just kind of helping me to get a better picture of what the world is like of working in, environmental ed, and also being able to, find funding, or if they have different people in the community that, they have worked with, or organizations or partners. I feel comfortable enough right now to be able to ask some of those things of some of the people in their leadership. However, I also can acknowledge that we have a good relationship, but I feel, I don't want to be too competitive. If there are, other organizations or other funding opportunities or partnerships, I guess that's something that I get a little nervous about, of not wanting to make it less of a relationship between us, if that makes any sense. Yeah, so kind of going forward, that's something I'd like to be open with them about, but I also understand everybody's got their own relationships too, to not necessarily step on each other's toes.
Right. Well, one thing that you mentioned that I think is worth, just re-emphasizing is, figuring out, what are some things that from where I sit in my organization that I can do to support your organization? That just helps, establish, maintain, and build that trusting relationship that you have with an ally. Folks will lose allies pretty quickly if all of a sudden it feels very one-sided. And after a while, it's like, wow, I seem to be doing all these things to support, this other organization or this other person, and it's not necessarily reciprocal, right? And so I like how you mentioned that, as well as just, taking that moment to ask how they're doing and what's some kind of support that an ally might need, and that can be reciprocal. So I appreciate that perspective. All right, folks who had your hand, you can put your hands down. We're gonna move on to the next one here. So again, for everybody else, we've got Mallory's example. Again, I ask you or invite you to think about what on this list are some things that you could be doing more strategically with the allies that you have identified. Okay, so opponents. So how many of you, go ahead and raise your hand if you had thought of somebody or a group that you would consider to be an opponent. And when you have identified somebody in a situation, say, I think in this situation, they might be an opponent. Here are some things that you can do strategically, right? Which is going to be different than how you engage with an ally. And that's what we're kind of getting at here is you're going to engage with people differently based off of where you put them on this grid in that moment. So with an opponent, are you telling them, the reason that you value them and that that they're going to tell you the truth and be honest and candid with you? Are you clear about your position and what you want with this group or with this person? State your understanding of their position and what they want, and recognize where you disagree. So you also understand they have a different point of view. Are you able to express that to them so they know that they're being heard as well and that you understand their different perspective? Have you stated your intention to work together to try and resolve those problems? Hey, we have a trusting relationship. We've worked together in the past. We're not seeing eye to eye right now, but I want to resolve this disagreement and find a way that perhaps we can work together and collaborate. Are you working together with this opponent or these opponents to look for alternatives, their consequences, and an attempt to negotiate a resolution? So again, you have a trusting relationship. So you may have a vision and a goal, but does that mean that it's the only path forward? No, there could be multiple routes there. And this is somebody, or this is a group that can help you find another way to get to your stated goal, or it could actually have you change your particular goal and realize actually there's another goal that actually might be even better that other folks might be able to get on board with. But you're willing to shift and adapt and modify because you have a trusting relationship with this individual or this group. And are you asking them what would it take for them to agree or support your goals moving forward? So go ahead and raise your hand. I see one hand up already. If you identified a person or a group as being an opponent, and I'll ask you the same question. What makes in your situation that person or that group an opponent? What are you already doing on this list? And what could you be doing more of on this list? So again, I invite you to raise your hand if you've identified an opponent. I see one hand up so far. And so we'll go with Christine. If you could come off mute and share with us a little bit about your situation.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, please go ahead.
Okay, so raise your hand. The opponent person, so I made the grid, and it's not like we disagree on everything. And this individual's with another organization. We're both in conservation organizations, somewhat separate missions, but we work very closely together as organizations. And this person and I are doing a lot of community engagement together. And but we trust each other, like, we've had a good working relationship the last 3-4 years. We both had an incident where something happened and I disagreed with them. And so I sent them an email. And they responded back and explained their position. I said, okay, thank you for sharing. This is my position. And if it were to come up again, I would just hold hold true what I feel comfortable with. And I think, yeah, we tell each other what we value in that email exchange. We told each other what we valued and why we reacted or did what we did. And yes, the individual definitely was clear on what they wanted, and I was clear with what I wanted, making sure no one felt they had to do something they weren't comfortable with. And then state your intention to work together. It wasn't necessarily, I didn't feel like we had to state our intention to keep working together, because I don't know if it was necessarily a problem as of yet. But that might be something we have to look forward to in the future. And the consequences, yes, I expressed when they when they were reaching out to somebody to volunteer, I'll explain. I mentioned to them, sure, we want to, the intention is to move forward with conservation practices, but the consequence is perhaps burdening that one person. Maybe we should refrain for that. You know, that was the consequence I was looking at. And they didn't see it as a consequence, which I thought was interesting, even though I explained it. And that's a perspective I think everyone had, different people have. That's what you could take for them to agree support with goals. And that's what it would take for them to agree or support your goals. I did not get to that. I hope I answered.
Yeah, no, that was great. That was great. And you touched on something that I think also is worth re-emphasizing is just because somebody appreciating that just because somebody doesn't agree initially with the change that you want to make or your goal or whatever shouldn't have to erode trust, right? But sometimes we let that happen, right? And that can happen when we're very passionate about something and someone doesn't agree with us. All of a sudden we make it a much bigger thing than it needs to be, and all of a sudden trust can be eroded. I think what's so critical about this model is actually having people who are opponents are very important, right? And it's so valuable to have folks that think differently than we do and have a different perspective. And I think, Jennifer, you put this in the chat that she sees her best friends as being opponents, right? When I seek advice, they love me unconditionally, but always give me a new perspective. In my professional life, that's harder for me to think of. But yeah, I mean, when we think about it in our personal life, right? Sometimes it is our best friends. The people who are like, hey, I ride or die with this person. And sometimes we just don't agree. Like they're going to come up to me like, bro, what are you doing? Like, you don't want to do this, right? But it's out of love. It's out of that trusting relationship. So how do we make sure that we don't conflate opposition to an idea with now I don't trust this person or I don't have that respecting relationship? It's being able to see opposition as something that is actually quite valuable. I think that's a cornerstone of a lot of like conflict management and conflict work is not seeing conflict as something that's inherently bad. It's actually can be quite good. So I'm gonna move us forward a little bit quicker in the interest of time. So I'll go through a couple more of these and then we'll end with the pleasers, because I think there was one question that somebody had asked that was like, what do I do with basically folks who are demonstrating pleasing behaviors? So we'll do this one and then I'll talk about the last two. So let's say you're working with a group and your analysis is, okay, I think they're showing some pleasing behavior. So what do you do with these folks? How do you strategically engage with them? So one is identify shared goals. Are they fully aware of what those shared goals are? Are you restating to them, this is what you want and this is what I want, right? Acknowledge, be transparent around the strain in your relationship with this individual or these folks and the lack of trust without getting into specifics. But state it, saying, oh, we've had 3 meetings on this and you've expressed a lot of support, but haven't been able to follow through. And, I want us to actually sit on that for a while because I want to better understand how we can get some forward progress on this. What are your hopes for that improved working relationship? Are there any changes that you plan to make in your behaviors or actions so that they can actually move forward on some of the things that they commit to, or just be more honest around like, I know I said yes last time, but it's actually completely out of my control. Well, be more honest. Like, I want to know what you can actually do, not what you think I want to hear, right? And ask them what they think would establish a better working relationship. How can you help them in whatever way be able to move forward on some of these things? Or is there some support that they might need? Is there an ally that you might actually be able to connect with them? Is there a perspective that your opponent is providing that they also need to be aware of before they feel comfortable moving forward on something, right? These are all ways that you can really take advantage of and leverage the diverse perspectives that people have on that type of change. So again, I'll ask folks to raise their hand if you thought of a person or a group in your situation that you would identify as demonstrating pleasing behaviors. And again, I know from one of the questions that there's somebody there. Okay, see some hands coming up here. All right. Yeah, I'm not surprised that there are a little bit more folks here. I think we all have experience with like, yeah, I've definitely encountered folks in situations. All right, let's go with Elena. If you are able to please come off of mute and share with us your situation, who this person or this group is, and what you're already doing from this list and what you could be doing more of from this list.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, so I'm working with some teachers on some projects. We're based in Venezuela. So teachers are really grossly underpaid. So and teachers usually in any community are overburdened, and you know it's like a common thing, but in Venezuela right now it's particularly difficult. And we work in a project in a community in a rural area. And when we bring facilitators, everybody's like, "Oh, we'd like you to stay here. I wish you guys could stay in the community helping us." And then we try to use this model of, basically train the trainer and try to empower them. And and when but sometimes they don't follow through their own goals, or like if the facilitators are not there, are not present. I think we think they don't own the project. And I'm part of my family is part of that community, but still, like, they may see us as outsiders. Culturally, they're very quiet too, so that's also something that sometimes we may not understand them well or read them well. So yeah, these are some of the challenges. They say yes to many things, so they're really excited about, like, and they agree with the, they there seems to be buying into the proposals, but then I don't know, things sometimes some of the activities we'd like them to take agency on, they don't seem to take it. So yeah. And I work in community organizing for a while, so, and I've seen some of this in other areas. So yeah.
Great example. And again, what I'll reemphasize or highlight from what you said is the cultural dimensions of how people show up in some of these situations, right? Demonstrating pleasing behavior, there can be some cultural elements to that, also depending on the context. And so what that kind of brought up for me is, perhaps in some situations in a large group setting, so with other people in the space, some folks may say, like, I'm going to say yes, right? Because I feel like whether it's around saving face or just showing support in a large group, I feel like culturally I need to, agree, because there's a bunch of people who are in this meeting. But maybe in a one-on-one conversation, on the side afterwards, folks might feel more comfortable or might feel it's more culturally appropriate to be a bit more candid around, look, I know in the meeting I said, yes, we can do X, Y, and Z. But in a smaller one-on-one conversation, I might say, okay, but let me actually really explain the constraints that we have here about why we might not be able to do X, Y, or Z. So that awareness around when you are seeking input or a perspective from individuals to determine, do they agree, do they not agree, this and that, the context can matter as well, and depending on who's in the meeting and all that kind of stuff. So I think that was something that I really appreciated you sharing, Elena. So I'll go through the last two here, and then we'll love to take questions and then ask folks for their takeaways. But on adversaries, so if you identified some individuals as adversaries, again, your goal here is to just minimize or neutralize the threat. You're not trying to change their opinion, right? So acknowledge the strain in the relationship. Look, I understand that we are just on opposite sides of the table on this, and we're not going to come to agreement. You can share your concern about what's going on and invite them to do the same. If you, again, not trying to change your mind, but I want to better understand why you're just not going to move on this and why we don't see eye to eye. You're going to acknowledge if you've contributed to the problem. You know, I realize that this may be one of the reasons why, again, we're at this impasse. I hope that, you know, moving forward or in the future and other engagements, we might be able to have an improved relationship, even if right now that doesn't seem to be the case. But you're not going to make demands. You're not going to try and change them. And you don't have to in many cases. And I'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. But if you have plans to pursue your agenda, despite their opposition, you know, say so. You want to be genuine and authentic and say, I'm still going to move forward with this. I still think this is a good approach or a good goal for us to achieve, despite your opposition. So last point I'll make on this is that oftentimes, particularly when we're very passionate, I've been doing community organizing work for like 25 years. One thing that folks, there's a tendency is the more passionate you're about something, the more drawn you are to those who are in very much adversarial to you to try and convince them. Because I can't believe this person just doesn't understand my perspective or my goal or my passion. So you spend so much time and energy trying to convince people who are way on the other end of the spectrum. When in reality, to get that change to occur, or to make that difference happen, you actually don't need people who are on the way other end of the spectrum. So is it a better use of your time and energy and effort to focus on folks who are on the fence? They haven't really taken a position yet. But if you can get a large group of people who are sitting on the fence to actually then realize, oh, actually, I think this is a good idea. I want to go in that direction too. Or if you're able to mobilize your allies to be more vocal, be more supportive, or if you're able to get clarity from pleasers around how they can actually move to commitment, that's how you're going to get a community to move in a certain direction. You don't always need to invest a lot of time and energy on those who have dug their heels into a position that is very much far from yours. So I think that's a kind of one thing to consider. Really, you just need to minimize their threat or neutralize their ability. They're trying to influence as well. What can you do to minimize that threat or neutralize that threat? And then last is fence sitters. So if you've identified folks who are demonstrating these types of behaviors, tell them your position again and again, ask them where they stand, state what you want in the way of how they can support you. If they continue to be non-committal, express your disappointment about not knowing where they stand, right? If that's really what's going on inside, express that to them and saying, hey, you know, over these last many months, like I'm starting to notice like you haven't been able to commit on something. And so what can I do to help you kind of get over that hurdle? What would it take for them to support your ideas? They're there. And again, there's some cultural elements to that as well. But what can you do to help them get over that hurdle? So you want to educate and determine their position is your goal with folks who are fence sitters. So I'm going to put this back up here and open it up to questions. But while people are thinking about questions, I'm going to invite everybody to put in the chat, looking at this grid, allies, opponents, pleasers, fence sitters, adversaries. I just want to get a general sense of when you're thinking about your community engagement work, what people or what groups of people do you want to be more intentional about how you engage with them? So type like, oh, you know what, based off of this, I want to be more intentional and more strategic with my allies or with my opponents or adversaries, fence sitters or pleasers. I just want to see kind of what has landed for folks here. Go ahead and type it into the chat. Okay, I'm seeing the first couple ones here. Opponents, yeah. Mm. Good. I'm happy to see that yeah, of this concept of opponents and yeah, fence sitters. Great. And I will share these slides as well. So you have this. You can also, there's books written on this. This is a model that's been around for probably 30 plus years. So it's written about in various places if you want to dive deeper. But I'll share the slides. So I'll open it up here to some questions or also just comments as well, perspectives.
So Daryn, thank you so much for this. And if anybody has a question, please put it into the chat. Or we can unmute you for a minute if we want to stay a few extra minutes. And we do have a few closing comments from Carrie. But Daryn, that was fantastic. I mean, this model is so helpful because we don't often think about it in this way. And even though I've seen this many times, it's so helpful to hear. Let me just look if there's any questions. Carrie, have you seen any?
I think that we've covered most of the things that came through registration. Somebody was asking for maybe a few more resources or any additional things, but it sounds like, Daryn, you'll be sharing your slides. So if there's anything you want to add in that, we'll make sure it goes out with the email as well.
Yeah, I mean, a couple resources that I will share, where elements of this is kind of referred to, is How to Influence the Art of Making Things Happen by Joe Owen. I can put these in the chat here. I'll put a few in the chat. Give me 1 second.
That is great, Daryn. Thank you. And I'm going to switch screens for a moment here. But of course, people can still ask any questions in the chat. And Daryn, thank you so much for doing this. It's so helpful. And we could probably spend like a week with you to really dig into some of the issues on community engagement. But this is such a helpful model, and you are just such a pro at trying to figure out how we can do this work better together and collaborate, especially now, and how we build bridges. So I hope we can bring you back to do a part 2.
Would love that.
Okay, and if you have extra questions, let us know. And then I'm going to turn it over to close, but I hope you're seeing all the hearts and claps going up in the, Carrie, I'm going to turn it over to you to close us out.
That sounds great. And yeah, thanks again, Daryn. This was a wonderful conversation with so much to think about. I'll be filling in that grid for weeks to come. So helpful. And for everyone who's attending, as always, you'll receive an email in the next few days that has the recording, a link to the resources, and just a reminder of where you can find all the information about Daryn. It'll be coming to your inbox, so keep an eye out for that, or you can go to the link that you see right there. And as we wrap up this webinar, we're ready for the next one on May 20th. The Coalition for Climate Education Policy, or CCEP, is going to be hosting this webinar, Teaching for Tomorrow, How States Are Leading the Way on Climate Change. So CCEP has invited representatives from state departments of ed and leaders of nonprofits who are going to be sharing success stories and guidance for those who are hoping to create similar climate ed policies and programs in their states. So you can register at the link shown here, and we'll be excited to see you on May 20th. Also, our 30 Under 30 program is up and running still. You can submit your nomination or self-nomination. This is an international recognition and leadership development program for young people who are using education to positively impact their communities. So check out the link here, and there's all sorts of tips for strong nominations. And again, May 12th is the last day to submit, so please consider doing so. And we've also got another deadline coming up soon, which is the call for presentations for our annual conference and research symposium. The theme this year is Forward Together, and so we are welcoming your proposals to present at our virtual conference, which is taking place this fall. So please check out conference.nwaawe.org for the details on presentation formats and different topics that you can share about. We also have our Natural Start Alliance conference coming up. This is also a virtual conference, and it is open for registration. This is a nature-based early learning conference that happens each year as well. So if you register, you'll not only be able to attend the event in July, but you'll also have on-demand access to all of the sessions and materials for a full year to come. So check that out. And then lastly, we would love to hear what you learned today, what you took away from this conversation, and any ideas that you have for future webinars. So there's a QR code here, and also you'll receive in that follow-up email a link to this survey. We'd love to hear what you think about today's conversation, kind of how it challenged you to think about your partnerships, and again, anything that you'd like to see covered in a future webinar. But thank you again, Daryn. Thank you for everyone who shared, especially those who came on camera or came off mute. That is bold to do it. So we love that you engaged in that way. And yeah, it was a wonderful conversation. So thanks again to everyone.
Thanks, Daryn. Thanks, Carrie, for all you do. And thanks to everyone on who has been on this webinar and participated. Thanks, everyone.